Hi, it's Amelia here from Undercover Architect. In this interview, I speak with David. He and his wife Yvonne are designing and building a passive house for their brand new home in Victoria. Now, David in this interview talks about how he and his wife Yvonne went about finding the site, pulling together their team, and the key learnings that they've had along the way of designing and building a passive house. It's a great insight to this process as a client or a homeowner. So even if you're not building a passive house, this is a great video to watch so that you can see as a homeowner what you can do to drive your project in the right direction so it actually delivers the home that you're dreaming of. And if you have an interest in passive house, David gives some great tips and key learnings that he and his wife Yvonne have found in their experience of building a passive house. And I really look forward to checking in with them in another year's time to see how they've enjoyed living there as well. I hope you enjoy the interview. David, thank you so much for joining us. It's really exciting to have you on the podcast. I know that you're a podcast, you listen to the Get It Right podcast, so it's great to have you here, being able to talk to the UA community about your experience as a client building and a homeowner building a passive house. Can you tell us a bit about, who you're building this home for, your family structure, sort of how many people are going to be in this house and how long you sort of envisage yourself being here?
Sure. Hi, Amelia. So we're building. We've got three kids. So my wife and I have got three kids, but they're all at leaving age. One's left already. One's about to leave, and the third one will come with us for a little bit. So really, it's just for the two of us, but with enough space to welcome our children and our friends back again, but not have them there permanently. So let's go with that one.
Comfortable, but not too comfortable, hey?
Absolutely, yeah, that's exactly right. For us, it's going to be our forever house. That's certainly our plans at the moment.
Fantastic. And so, what a great opportunity to be able to create a new home at this point in your life. How did you go about, finding the site? What's the site like that you're building the home on? What's sort of the surrounding areas and how you went about choosing it particularly?
Sure. So we're originally from the UK. We've been in Australia about 15 years, and we both grew up in sort of small villages outside of country towns. So we live in the suburbs of Melbourne to get our kids through school. So a good government school here, want to be there, but we always knew that we would move out, and move back to country sort of living. And we had always sort of thought the goldfields areas of Victoria, and Dalesford is where we sort of had our heart set on. But over the years, that's got busier and busier, and we wanted to be quieter than that. And we were driving back from Dalesford, and it was pouring with rain. And we drove through Trentham, which is a village, and it sort of felt right, even in the bad weather. And then, fortuitously, just as we were driving through, there was suddenly a land for sale sign. So we turned off, and we had a look, and and that was it.
How serendipitous, hey? That sounds like it was meant to be.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Perfect. And it's a fairly big block of land that's been subdivided. So the person's owned it for a long time. They subdivided it and they made it into like a small community. So it's not too big, not too small, sort of Goldilocks type stuff. And there's a big chunk of forest which they've left at the back for everybody who owns a lot in there to sort of enjoy. That's not going to get developed on, which is fantastic. Our plot's about 3/4 of an acre. I would prefer to be a bit more isolated. My wife doesn't want to be, so we'll go with this one, which is great. So 15 minutes walk into the village to the pub. You can walk through the woods or you can walk along the road. Just nice.
Oh, that sounds like a gorgeous place to be ending up.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. And did you look at any particular orientation or anything like that when you were buying? Did you have any criteria like that in your choosing?
Yeah, so we were starting to think about not passive house in because I didn't really know much about that, but a bit more about sort of solar passive. So using, I've been reading about, rather than heating and cooling holes, and can we use the sun? So we wanted something which was at north, not too much blocking on north facing. So that was really it. So our lot is actually onto a very quiet road, north side of us, so nobody can build there, and there are no trees to get in the way. So that was really the only choice we had to make in terms of the orientation of the lot.
Fantastic. And the decision to build new, what was, instead of renovating an older home, was there a particular direction about that?
Yeah, we've renovated lots of houses over our time, mainly in the UK. We've done a little bit here, and always wanted to do our own. We've made lots of horrible mistakes. We've done lots of things right. So this is a chance to sort of coalesce all of that thinking together, and do something which we for us.
Oh, brilliant. And so what were your key goals when you thought about, okay, this, I mean, because it's just a fantastic clean slate, isn't it? You think the kids are leaving home, we get to create something that's not about, dealing with little people becoming big people and, all of that kind of flexibility and functionality that we need. This is a really, it's just a gorgeous opportunity. What were your goals when you were thinking about how this new home would need to function and what you really wanted to create for yourselves?
So we're not looking, nothing particularly grand. So we're not looking for a big showy off place, no McMansion, this sort of stuff. So, but also not too pokey. And something that is, if you like, right sized, but also flexible. So a key thing there is about to be able to change rooms. So for example, we haven't done built-in robes in any sort of room. So in effect, each room can be something different if it needs to be. So something that's practical, not too big, and flexible, because we'll have people to stay, both our friends here and hopefully people from overseas and our kids back, when they need to chill out, etc. So to accommodate that, but be a small enough size to be manageable, and a little bit interesting. And interesting is then our architect brings to life what interesting is, but something a little bit more interesting. Yeah.
And so you said you started thinking about solar passive. What led you to sort of making the discovery and really committing to Passivhaus? Because you've really gone all in terms of, what you're doing and the team that you've pulled together. So how did you sort of start that journey and make a commitment to that being the way that you wanted to build your home?
Good question. I think in our minds, it had always been it was going to be sustainable or eco, but I didn't really quite know what that meant. We just had that as a general target, if you like. So the first thing to do was to find, and I went looking for an architect first. So to find an architect who was their credentials and their desire was sustainability. So we were really lucky. We found Talina Edwards. She's Ballarat based. Sustainability is her thing, and we sort of clicked, from there. And then the ideas developed really from that. Just as her saying, well, what about this? Have you thought about this? What about this? That's when the whole solar orientation thing became. That was the first cab off the rank, get that right. And we hadn't really thought about passive particularly at that stage, or she had inklings of it. But then the more we looked at it, we thought, well, actually, let's investigate that more. And then that's what led on to finding a builder who had experience and credentials around that one. And then it just snowballed from there. A good snowball, not a bad snowball.
And how would you describe Passivhaus? Like, what would be your definition? When people have said to you, so you're building a Passivhaus, what does that exactly mean? What do you tell them?
So the definition, if you look on the web, is sort of fairly clear, but I try and explain it to people in two ways. There's what it does and then how it does it. The what it does, it means you can live in a place which is comfortable in terms of temperature and etc. all year round, and not having to spend a lot of money in terms of energy to achieve that. So that's the what it does. And then how it does it is, massive insulation, airtight, good solar orientation, using the sun in the winter to heat it up and not getting over hot in the summer. And then heat recovery ventilation, not to throw all of the hot air out that you've just got. And those are the sort of four things. So it's the achieving something and then how you get there. So that's how I try and explain it.
That's actually a really brilliant, succinct explanation. So I love that.
I've read it so many times that I'll go from that. I don't claim any of that as being mine.
It's fantastic. And when you were thinking about this, in terms of, looking at your budget and what you're going to spend on the home, did you think, oh, look, we're just going to need extra money for all of these Passivhaus measures? This is going to cost us more because we want to do this sustainability thing. Perhaps we'll figure out payback periods and lower cost, heating and cooling bills. Like, how did you figure it? Because this is the big thing for people. They think, oh gosh, this is going to be too expensive. And so it immediately gets dismissed at that point. They see it sort of taking away from their, opportunity to have the house that they want. How did you think about your budget and investing it in creating a home like this?
I'll be honest, I had absolutely no idea at the start. I had absolutely no idea what costs would be attributable to be doing something in a passive way versus a normal way. And then there's always higher costs if you're doing something bespoke rather than just buying something from a volume builder, for example. But the more I read about, so loads of research, internet, etc., and speaking to people, but the more I read about it, that if you get a builder who knows what he's doing, then the costs don't need to be significantly more, or in fact any more than maybe a traditional, bespoke house would be. And it's more about it's that managing the trade so that one trade doesn't go and muck up what the previous one's done, etc. So if you've got somebody who knows what they're doing and knows about passive houses, then you're not, and there are ranges of quotes. It's between 0 to 10%, maybe more than a traditional house would be. So if you look at it in that way, it actually is a bit of a no-brainer, because you're going to get that sort of money back over the lifetime of the house with the massively reduced energy cost. But it was not really about that. It was about sustainability and comfort with the main drivers. I haven't got an unlimited budget at all. I've got a budget where I'm working in, but because our needs are quite simple, we're not looking at having a fantastic fancy house. It's more about making sure the structure of it is there and it works and everything's functional. So therefore we could afford that little bit extra premium to make it passive, because I'm not trying to put bells and whistles everywhere.
Fantastic. No, I think that's a great way of looking at it. And I find that people who are designing sustainably, budget's not just their baseline criteria and everything. They are thinking more long term. It is about alignment with values, about, your opportunity to align what your home is doing with the values that you have about, the planet and long-term future, sort of view and those types of things. So I think it's great that for you were all of those things weaving together, and it wasn't just about money. And the fact too that, at the end of the day, it's not a lot of people have said to me, I've been told it's 20-25% more. But it is that case of weighing up it as an upfront investment versus the long-term cost. And I don't think as homeowners we necessarily consider the payback and the balance period. We just think about, okay, I've got to cough up this money first. And then the energy bills and everything are just an inevitability that comes on, when if you can actually see it more holistically, then there is an opportunity to make that value judgment on that basis.
No, I agree. But I didn't go and do a detailed, cost projection on how much I'd save and things, because...
Oh, David, I'm disappointed.
Sorry, yeah. To be perfectly honest, a lot of it, it's lies and statistics. The numbers can tell you anything you want them to. And I thought, what, for me, it's the right thing to do. And if you can control the cost like you would want to do on any build, then, the passive is just another element to that. It's just another way of building. So I thought, we'll go for it. And we'll manage the scope of it with that as being one of the key elements. It's just another part of the build as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's great. And it's become a core part of your brief. So just
Absolutely.
like you want a living room of X size, you want it to be a passive home. So that's it. Yeah, it's a fantastic way to illustrate it. So now you said that you looked for an architect first, you were thinking about sustainability, and then, sort of started talking to a builder. You've also got Luke Plowman that we were talking to soon on the podcast, who's your consultant. Then, of course, there's a Passivhaus certifier. How have you sort of felt, the process of getting that right team together, getting the knowledge? Have you found that you've had to upskill yourself in terms of the terminology and the research? I can imagine a lot of homeowners think, gosh, this is a really complex subject. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of things I need to consider. How have you found that whole process and the support of your team and who you've chosen in working this through?
So for me, it's really interesting. So I've learned a whole heap of things during this process and really enjoyed it. So, I've enjoyed finding out about what Passivhaus is and isn't, and what you can do, and that's been great. And Talina, the architect, and Stu, the builder, they're both passionate about this and very good communicators. So they're happy to share information with me, and I'll just ask them anyway. So I'm learning that through that piece. If you like, the next lot of people in the puzzle, so people like Luke and other people like that, I've been less engaged directly with them. That's been more through Talina and Stu, working with them, although I've obviously been involved, but I've been taking their recommendations. For me, I don't have any skills in this area, so there's no point me hiring people who know what they're doing and then trying to tell them to do it my way. You've got to hire them and trust them, and I want them to tell me what they're doing, and I'm happy to question them, and I get nervous if they don't answer my questions, but these guys absolutely have done, and they're incredibly transparent, and that's important. But otherwise, you've got to employ people who know what they're doing and trust to let them get on and do it. So dealing with, say, Luke and other people, really Talina's been doing that, but I've been copied in and seen everything and quizzed them on a few things. But the key one was getting the right architect and then getting the right builder, because the builder, he's the guy who's got to turn he or she has got to turn my dreams and Talina's representation of that into what it's actually going to be on the ground. And Stu has brought incredible insight into that. Lots of things saying, look, if we did it this way, it would work so much better. And A, that would be cheaper for you, and B, it would be better for these reasons. So we got him in really early, and that's helped the whole process.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And it's a process that, the UA community will know that I recommend, is getting that collaborative team established really early, so that you've got the buildability, the budget, the design, and the reality of construction all feeding into each other at the same time. So you're creating a design in alignment with what you can afford as you go through it. And you're also building up those those key relationships that are, incredibly important. Your builder then understands the design and the design motivation. I mean, Stu will have such an intimate understanding of the design by the time he goes about building this home, that it just means that you'll protect all of that investment of energy and effort, that you've worked on with Talina, to ensure that you're actually getting the home as the finished product at the end. So I think it's great that you've been able to see this process really working for you in that regard. You said you'd done renovating before. Have you worked with an architect? Like, is there a specific reason you went, okay, we've worked with architects before, so we know this works, or is this the first time you've worked with an architect? I always find it really interesting how homeowners choose the avenue they choose.
So we've worked in Scotland, where we were living. We had an old sort of single-story house, and then we renovated that to go up into the roof and extend out to the back and everything. And we did that with an architect and some local builders. And local is key to me as well, because you get people who understand the vernacular and they understand the climate. Because I didn't say where we're living is about 700 meters above sea level, so we get snow, not real snow, but a bit of a dusting of snow each year, and it's a bit colder, which is why, again, passive is going to help us. But yeah, so we worked with an architect there, and I like that. And I've got my brother's actually an architect back in the UK, so I've been around this sort of thing for a long time. And it was always, when we've always talked about building a house, it was always going to have an architect doing it. It just was. Because I think that's the only way that you get something interesting, in my view, and not to down anybody else in the profession, but you guys are trained to do what you do, so let's use that.
Yeah, no, it's just lovely to get different insights into why people go about it the way that they do. So I think that some of the UA community will really identify that with that. Now, can I ask you? You sound like very, that you've had this sort of clear path, found the right team, you've worked towards this passive house result. Everything's going really well. Was there anything that you were really nervous about, or just unsure, weren't really, sure whether it was going to be the right way to go about things?
Yeah, I mean, I still joke with people that talk about this, as saying, especially people, because we're in this small evolving community of subdivisions, if you like. Then we've become known as the people with no heating, in the lot.
The crazy people, if there's dustings of snow
the crazy
as well.
people with no heating. And so we're going, I explained to them what Passive House is, and the fact that people in New Zealand have had this for a long time, for example, and if they get cold, they put another roast in the oven and the whole house heats up, for example. But I do say to them, I'll tell you in a year's time, and if I'm cold in the winter, I'll be at your house. So I'm actually less worried about that. I'm more worried about overheating, because it's much easier to warm up. You put a jumper on, or another one, however many you need, but it's really difficult to cool down. So the bit in my head is overheating. That's my worry, and that's still a worry. We've got to go through 12 months to work out whether this has it worked in the way we've done it. Undoubtedly, it's going to be so far ahead of our current house, which is an old weatherboard. But we've got the proof is in the pudding, and we won't get that for 12 months after we've moved in.
Gotcha. And the usability of it. So Daniel spoke to us about how the modelling is really sophisticated in terms of looking at the occupant use and the number of kilowatt hours demand on the home. Like, how involved have you been sort of in conversations about what your normal lifestyle is, and what do you feel like there's any limitations being placed on you in terms of you're only going to be able to heat it to this temperature, and if you put the thermostat up a couple of degrees, you're going to stuff the whole system and that kind of thing? Like, how's that process gone for you?
Yeah, no, good question. So we had those discussions initially. So when we were dealing with Luke about feeding everything into the PHPP spreadsheet and all this sort of stuff, which I don't understand, but the questioning part of it was good, and it was about how many people are going to be there most of the time. What do you do? Does somebody work at home during the day? Yada yada yada. This sort of stuff. Lots of modelling on solar orientation. So we've got sort of overhangs for the windows in the summer. Talking about temperatures, etc. So yeah, I think that that was stuff I hadn't expected to talk about, but did. So that seemed to go fine. Yeah.
Yeah. And have you felt like there's been any limitations about the kinds of materials you can choose, or the look of the house, or anything like that, in terms of the fact that you've made a decision to make it a passive house?
We were slightly restricted because we're in a bushfire zone. So especially the facings of the house, which are where the bushfire is likely to come from, we've had restrictions on materials there. But we were always going to, so it's predominantly colour bond. So it's always going to be colour bond anyway. So that's fine, for bushfire stuff. I mean, our front door, for example, we wanted a timber front door, but we couldn't have it because it's facing that way. It's timber on the inside, but it's aluminium clad on the outside. Still lovely, but it's not where we had thought. So no, because of the way we wanted to do it anyway, no restrictions. The shape of our house, which you've probably seen from the plans, is absolutely what you wouldn't choose for a passive house. You want best passive house you want is a cube. Minimal surface area to volume ratio, and we've gone for I think as Talina described it, a Star Trek sort of view of a main bit with two wings. So we've got lots of surface area compared to volume. So that's made it achieving the passive house criteria more difficult than it would do for a more standard house, but you can still do it. And actually, that was one thing which was both Stu, the builder, and Talina were quite excited about, from a professional point of view, to show that you can still achieve the high standards needed for passive house, but you don't have to have a boring, box to do it. You can be a bit more creative about the shape of it.
Yeah, it's very much a pavilion style home, and it's a beautiful floor plan. I can see it's going to serve you really, really well in terms of the type of lifestyle that you're talking about living in it. Like I can see it really expanding and contracting to you guys when there's just the two of you, not feeling like you're sort of inside a big soccer pitch, and then dealing with the hordes of crowds that might come for celebrations and those types of things. So I think the floor plan is fantastic, and it's Daniel was talking about how a corner is the sort of one of the most challenging thermal bridges, and so that's got to be somewhere that's got to be extra insulated to be able to meet passive house criteria. And you do have a lot of corners because of that pavilion style. So did you was there a case of the modelling and the design happening? Like, how does that happen? Does it happen alongside? Did you see that happening alongside each other and go, oh, do we really want to make this design decision because it has this impact on the modelling? And how did you feel as a client that process was sort of working for you?
Yeah, there was definitely that where Talina came up with an initial design, or a series of designs, which we picked that one, and then from then on it was a bit of sort of toing and froing between her and Luke about, well, if we do this, what does that do? And every time that, and again, I was in the middle of listening to your podcast at this point, and one of them was, push all of your changes to the beginning of the process, and then lock them down, and then minimize changes because they just get more and more expensive. And I think that gets magnified with something like Passive House. So that probably a bit of feedback to people who are interested in this is that at that point, it's not just what does it look like, and then the architect can draw it and you go, yeah, that's fine. You've then got to go off to the Passive House consultant and say, okay, well, if we do that, what do we now need to do? And we had to do that a couple of times, and there was a bit more shading, a bit more insulation, bit off here, bit on here, to make sure that we still stayed within the Passive House certification boundaries. But It worked well. It's just that extra layer every time. You've got to think, if I change that, what does that mean? And some fairly innocuous things can have an impact. So you've got to think of everything.
That's a very iterative process, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So I can imagine Talina and Luke working very closely with each other.
Yep.
And, did you feel that there was sort of this intuitive understanding of that, or was there sometimes surprises of what the software would throw out?
I think that everybody's still learning right now. So Talina's been involved in this, but she wasn't a Passive House specialist, as that she's gone on and done her Passive House course now and passed that, which is great. But she was learning through this process as well. So yeah, there were definitely learnings in there. But in a way, maybe that's quite good because she wasn't coming from the point of I've got to design a passive house, and therefore she might have creatively shut off some avenues already. So in the way this way, we've got a house which is designed how we want, and then it's, well, how do you make that work for passive? Rather than just say I've got to have a passive house, which might mean you throw some of your creative ideas out too early. So yeah, I think it worked fine.
Yeah, and I think the house that you're ending up with is going to be stunning. So it's just yeah, it's just been lovely. I've been keeping in touch with Talina through the process of it, and I've been, I know that you guys were open for Sustainable House Day as
That was amazing.
When it was under construction.
We had 147 people come through in the day.
Wow, that's brilliant. And did you find
work.
what kinds of, I mean, this is a question I'm throwing at left of field, but what kind of questions did you find that they were asking? What kind of things were people interested in terms of, when they started wandering through?
We had a whole range of people. We had builders coming through who were interested in passive but had no idea, and they were speaking to Stu and about it because they were into. We had people who knew heaps about passive. They'd either done one or were about to do one, to people who knew nothing about it whatsoever. So lots of the ones were about material choices. So I just directed them at Stu and said, speak to him. He knows what he's talking about in that one. But a bit of people just wanted to see what it actually looked and felt like. And because we opened it up partway through construction, they got to see the walls before they were finished, and they got to see the material. So I think people just wanted to see it as it was progressing. So yeah, whole range of levels of understanding, of skills, of different areas.
Yeah, I think that the understanding of passive house is definitely becoming more mainstream. And it's what I'm finding time and time again is the people who commit to this, both homeowners, professionals, builders, are incredibly passionate about it as an avenue for a great home that supports health and well-being, that's sustainable, energy efficient, and kind of the way of the future in terms of how we build and renovate homes, and the opportunity that we have to actually make a dent in much bigger kind of global issues like climate change and those types of things. So
yeah, absolutely.
And that, there is this underpinning of core values and alignment with strong beliefs about it. So I think it's great that you were able to open your doors or open your site and give people the opportunity to have a look and really understand it, because it's difficult to get the opportunity to see these types of home under construction unless you know someone. So it must have been amazing for all of those. I can see why you would have had a great turnout. So
yeah, no, it's good. It's good.
Now, Daniel and I joked about alarm bells going off in some head office somewhere when you open a window because of Passive House works on air tightness and the heat exchange system. How do you feel about, the flexibility of living in the home day to day and whether you'll stuff up the system at all?
See, that was my view as well when I started on this journey. I had heard that you've got to keep all of the windows shut and the doors. You hear people are building airlocks in effect to get into the house and shut the door and all these sorts of things. But the more I've been reading and the more I've been speaking to people, that's just not true. You just in the same way that in your normal house, if it's freezing cold outside, you wouldn't leave all of your windows open. You don't want to do that when the temperature differential is huge. But if you want to open the window for a particular reason, it's only going to have the amount of airflow through the house that you would do normally. If it's a howling gale outside, then it's going to be wind rushing. And if it's fairly still, then it's not, because they're at the same sort of pressure. So there's not this, it's complete furphy about this shutting windows. You don't need to open the windows to get fresh air. And that's the thing because when we were looking for a builder, we went around and looked at a few of them and went into a number of passive houses, either in partway through construction or done. And that was a comment from everybody, is that you don't need to open windows to get fresh air, which is why people open windows, because the system's doing that for you. So I'm not worried about if I do need to open them, like purging heat at night in the summer. If there's been a long build up, that's all fine. It's not going to screw the whole system up. So yeah, that was a big, I came in with that thinking we're going to have to live completely differently. And we are, somebody said to me, a passive house requires active ownership. So you do need to do a few things differently, but it's nothing major. It's not that you can't open windows, you've got to run around shutting them and screaming at people to shut windows or doors or whatever. It's just realizing that you don't need to, and it becomes second nature fairly quickly, from what I understand.
Yeah, I think that you don't need fresh air thing is really a key understanding of it, because the exchange system is working actively to do that job for you, and you
Yeah.
don't have that same staleness and locked in odors and things like that you would
Correct.
have in a traditional home. So I think
And it's doing it much better. So my understanding is it's doing it much better because it's doing it constantly. It's swapping the heat out. It's it's balancing everything up. You're not just taking what you get, which is what happens to be outside, which may be too hot, too cold, full of dust, whatever. You're getting something as a known quantity which you can control. So therefore, it's a better outcome.
Yeah, and has been predictively measured as well. So I think that for a homeowner is just an extraordinary opportunity, because the home can be modelled to such a high level for you to understand going in.
Yeah, absolutely.
But how that house is going to perform based on what you do is really great. So
Yep.
now, what are you most looking forward to about the home being finished and moving in and living in a passive house?
Actually, quietness. First of all, because it's location, it's quieter than the way we are. But because it's massively insulated and we've got triple glazing, then we're not exactly. So it is quite a lot colder up there than down here. So we did look at doing double part triple. We thought, no, let's So yeah, the window bill is frightening, but apart from that, it's all good. But yeah, quietness for a start. And just that. We've lived in the UK for most of our lives, where the building standards are pretty poor, and tend to have lived in very old houses. So therefore you can be standing at one end of a corridor and your hair's blowing from wind coming through allegedly shut doors and windows at the other end. So just I think that predictability, that level of thermal comfort and just a baseline the whole time, which you do deviate from, but not wildly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. And in terms of your key learnings, what for somebody who's thinking about this as an option for their new home or their renovation, what would be your advice to them in terms of getting started and, things that you've really learned along the way or wish you might have known earlier, or, that type of thing?
I think the things that have really worked for us, and I would recommend for everybody, is find your, and you've said it, you find your team, and I think the key people in that team are the architect and the builder. The rest are all supporting services to that, but those are the two key roles. And both of them the architect must understand passive to a degree. I think that's important, but less important than the builder, who absolutely has to do it, because they've got to make it work. And the devil is in the detail. And I see the deep level of detail which Stu and his team go to in the build. And and that's needed to achieve what we're trying to do. And if you don't understand that, then you're constantly having to be doing rework, and that's when it becomes expensive. So a builder who really gets passive houses, so they need to be experienced in it, and they need to be passionate about it, and get your core team right. And after that, it will, you've set yourself up for success. Things can go wrong, but you've set yourself up for success. The other one, and this is the only negative, is that we had our heart set on having a wood-fired stove in the house. We've always grown up with them in the UK. We love them when we go away on holidays here. You rug up, you get in front of the fire. We wanted one, and we were talked out of it in the passive house. And eventually we gave into that. And I'm glad we did, because basically you won't need it. First of all, you're puncturing holes in a thing which you're trying to make airtight. And secondly, you put that on and you will cook yourself alive in the house, because it just doesn't need that level of heat. So we're going to have a fire pit outside the window. That's our compromise.
Oh, nice.
So we can look at it outside. We don't actually go and sit around it, but it doesn't need to be inside the house. So So if you're wedded to a wood burner, then maybe a passive house isn't for you, or stick it out in the garden.
Yeah, or get a screensaver on your TV.
Correct. Absolutely.
No, well, that's fantastic. It's just been really lovely to hear about it from a homeowner's point of view. I'm usually speaking to professionals on the Get It Right podcast, and I think for the UA community to hear from somebody who's like them, who had some ideas and some ambitions and dreams about their future home, and has taken the steps, to achieve that, and pulled the right people around them. And you've clearly skilled yourself up along the way, but also built a team together that you can really trust, who've have done a great job in supporting you. And I think that the key of that collaboration and that approach is such an important part of achieving success. And I'm just really excited to see the home finished and you guys move in and, experience this and see, that it's delivering on all of the things that you dream for it. So thank you so much for your time, David. It's just been great.
No, you're welcome, Amelia. Anytime.